The house is unoccupied. How can that be? What do you mean that you do not possess the keys? My neighbour across the street stood on his porch, watching me while my knuckles turned white around my phone. I could barely hear him over the storm brewing in my chest. I'm Jasmine Rojas, and I had just spent 4 hours driving home from my university on spring break. Home. At least, I thought that's what I was returning to. But the house, my house, the one that had always been my refuge, had a for sale sign staked into the front lawn. The windows, once dressed in warm curtains, now stood bare. Through the glass, I saw a scattering of furniture, and near the entrance, 3 black trash bags. I leaned closer. Inside one, I spotted my old hoodie, books, and other bits and pieces of a life I hadn't fully packed up when I left for college. On the phone, my Uncle Thomas's voice trembled. "Your father said you should have called first. Didn't they tell you they moved last week?" "No," I whispered. My throat tightened. "They didn't tell me anything." My fingers fumbled as I dialed my father. The phone rang, then connected. "Hello?" His voice was flat, empty. "Dad?" I said. "The house is empty. There are garbage bags on the porch with my stuff in them. What's going on?" The line went silent. Then, without any emotion, "You're an adult now. Deal with it." I stared at my phone, heart thudding. I called my mother, straight to voicemail. My younger brother? Deadline. Nothing. No goodbye, no address, no explanations. I stood frozen as the sun dipped behind the old maple tree in the front yard, casting long, familiar shadows. My father and I had planted that tree when I was 8. It had grown tall and strong, unlike the roots my family had promised to nurture. I had always tried to do everything right. Even from college, I sent a portion of my scholarship money home every month. I maintained a 3.9 GPA in pre-law while holding a part-time job. I kept my head down, avoided drama, helped out whenever I could. Instead of crying, I dragged the trash bags to my car. I packed what I could, drove to the nearest motel, and spent the night there, carefully placing my salvaged belongings in the dim room. I'd forgotten my winter clothes, a few textbooks, and my pillow. In one broken photo frame was a beach picture, my family smiling under the summer sun 3 years ago. All teeth. No truth. That night, I made a quiet vow. If they could erase me without a word, I would do the same. I would cut them out of my life and build something they couldn't tear down. My parents had immigrated from Mexico before I was born. Growing up, family comes first was practically a sacred rule. My dad worked 2 jobs to support us. My mum cleaned houses. Every night, they reminded us, we gave up everything for you. Education is your ticket. So while my classmates worked summer mall jobs, I interned at the courthouse. I believed getting into university on a pre-law scholarship was the first return on their investment. Then there was Gabriel, my younger brother. Struggled with school, got caught shoplifting. Twice. Spent hours playing video games while I studied flashcards. And yet, they always forgave him, defended him, protected him. "He's still finding his way," they'd say. And they left him behind too? That night in the motel, I reached out to Professor Wilkins, my constitutional law mentor. She was shocked. "They just left?" "Yeah," I whispered. "Come stay with me," she said without hesitation. "Until the dorms reopen, we'll figure things out together." She lived alone in a creaky Victorian house filled with books and 2 aging cats. She handed me a spare key and said, "Well, focus on your research. Use this time to study." So that's what I did. I buried my pain in textbooks. Thanks to her connections, I landed a summer internship at Riverton Law Partners, focusing on housing law. The irony wasn't lost on me. Studying tenant rights while my own family had made me homeless. "Use it," Professor Wilkins encouraged one night over tea. "The best advocacy comes from personal experience." She was right. The image of my family photo in a garbage bag clung to me. That night, I blocked every one of their numbers. From then on, whenever someone asked about my family, I replied, "We're not in touch." At Riverton, feelings weren't part of the job. The work quickly shifted from coffee runs to intense case research. My supervisor, attorney Eleanor Grayson, noticed something in me. "You listen. You really hear people," she said after I helped a young mum navigate an eviction. I began assisting with intake interviews, people losing their homes because of greedy developers or neglectful landlords. Their stories hit home. One night, after a long day of interviews, I stayed late, organising case notes. Eleanor found me surrounded by paperwork. "Working through the night?" she asked gently. "These families have nowhere to go," I said, showing her eviction notices from an entire complex. Developers had terminated leases early, offering just 2 weeks in a motel, barely enough time to find a new home, let alone save for rent. "This system is broken," I said. "It's not right." She looked at me. "So, what are you going to do about it?" That question stayed with me. It was during a financial aid workshop back on campus that I heard about social innovation grants, designed to support programs solving local problems. The deadline? 2 weeks away. Fueled by frustration and determination, I drafted a proposal for a student-led housing advocacy program. Eleanor helped me refine the idea. I called it the Safe Space Initiative, support for students and low-income families battling eviction. When it was finished, Professor Wilkins and Eleanor reviewed every word. We submitted it and waited. Then, 6 months after my parents disappeared, they called me. "Jasmine," my father's voicemail said, "your mother's worried about you." No apology, no explanation, just, "Call us." I didn't. Another voicemail followed. "It's immature to ignore your parents like this." Still, I stayed silent. More calls came, sometimes begging, sometimes demanding, but never a once admitting guilt. And then the news came. I had won the grant. A $25,000 Social Innovation Award from my university, enough to bring Safe Space to life, a paid role to continue my work during the school year. I celebrated with Eleanor and Professor Wilkins, the people who had supported me not out of obligation, but out of belief. By the new year, we had helped 23 students fight illegal evictions. Our tiny office, a converted church basement, buzzed with volunteer paralegals and law students earning clinical hours. And for the first time since I stood before that empty house, I felt powerful. I had taken what broke me and turned it into purpose. As our little team grew, so did the weight of our mission. The waiting list for Safe Space was out of control. More people needed help, and our modest setup just wasn't enough. One afternoon, I looked across the piles of files cluttering the desks and turned to Eleanor. "We need more resources, more people, more room, and definitely more money." She nodded thoughtfully. "You may be in luck. The Watkins Foundation is accepting proposals for their annual social justice grant. The amount they were offering could fund salaries, benefits, and office space for a real legal aid team." I poured myself into the application. For weeks, I revised our proposal late into the night, gathering testimonials from clients, compiling data on housing insecurity, and fine-tuning every sentence. The final document was 47 pages long. It captured everything: our mission, our method, our measurable results. 2 days after submission, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. "Jasmine, it's Mrs. Hernandez, your old neighbour." I blinked in surprise. I hadn't spoken to her since the day I found my family's house abandoned. "Hi, is everything okay?" She continued. "Your brother told me you don't answer calls from numbers you don't know. I hope it's all right. I'm calling you." My guard instantly went up. I was sure this was about reconnecting with my parents. But then she said, "It's about the house. There was a break-in last night. The police thought maybe you had returned, but your father asked me to check in with you before reporting anything." "I haven't been back," I replied, trying to suppress a bitter laugh. "And I don't have the keys anymore." "Well," she said, lowering her voice, "the police found something. An envelope. It had your name on it. What kind of envelope? I didn't open it, but it looks official. It's from a law firm. A law firm? I asked her to read the return address and law firm's name. Something in my chest tightened as I scribbled the details down with a shaking hand. Mrs. Hernandez paused and then added, "It's about your grandmother's estate, the one in Mexico." I froze. My grandmother passed away when I was 13. What about her estate? You inherited something, Jasmine, she said carefully. Land, and there's a bank statement. It shows over 400,000. I nearly dropped the phone. My grandmother had lived modestly her whole life. Where would that kind of money come from? Mrs. Hernandez explained that a resort company had developed condominiums on the land after my grandmother's death. My share was tied to the sale of 2 of the units. When was the inheritance finalised? I asked, my voice thin. There was some rustling of paper before she answered. Last March. March, 1 month before my parents vanished without a word. That couldn't be a coincidence. They had known about the inheritance, and they still left me behind. While I was still reeling, another call came in. It was the Watkins Foundation. We were finalists. They invited us to present in person before the board. This should have been the happiest moment of my year. But all I could think about was my grandmother's legacy and the betrayal that had followed it. I confided in Eleanor and Professor Wilkins. The law firm confirmed everything. The money was real. The inheritance was mine. And most damning of all, my parents, listed as my legal guardians, had been notified a full year ago. They kept it from me, I said hollowly over dinner with Professor Wilkins. They knew, and they still packed up and left. She gently placed her fork on the table. Have you thought about why they might have done it? Money, I said flatly. They probably thought they deserved it more than I did. She nodded slowly. Sometimes people withhold things because they think they know what's best, or because they want control. Or maybe, I said quietly, they just never planned to tell me at all. The money arrived in my account just 3 days before the Watkins presentation. I hadn't decided how to use it yet, but for the first time in years I felt safe, grounded. I wasn't at the mercy of anyone else anymore. The day of the presentation arrived, a bright Saturday in May. I showed up at the Watkins Foundation offices an hour early, notes in hand, wearing the navy business suit I had bought on sale and ironed the night before. I wanted to look calm and confident, even if my heart felt like it might burst. Eleanor arrived 20 minutes early, dressed in charcoal grey, carrying a folder of documents. "You ready?" she asked, sliding into the seat beside me. "As I'll ever be," I said, trying to smile. She leaned in and whispered, "Don't forget to focus on the stories. Show them the people we help. That's what makes it real." We were led into a sleek boardroom. 8 members of the board sat around a long, polished table. Philanthropists, local leaders, and a retired judge. William Watkins, the foundation director, stood to greet us personally. "Ms. Rojas, Ms. Grayson, we were very impressed with your proposal. Please, show us what Safe Space is all about." I connected my laptop and launched into our presentation. I spoke about the beginnings of Safe Space, the impact we'd made, and the structural issues we'd encountered. Eleanor followed with legal context, explaining how our approach closed critical gaps in services. Everything was going smoothly until the boardroom door opened. A foundation assistant entered quietly, leaned toward Mr. Watkins, and whispered something. He nodded, then turned to me. "Ms. Rojas, it appears someone is here insisting they speak with you. They say it's urgent." My breath caught in my throat. "Your family," he added softly. I felt Eleanor's hand gently squeeze my arm. "You don't have to," she said. "We can ask them to wait." I looked up, steadying myself. "Please, let them know I'll speak with them after the presentation. This is too important to pause." Mr. Watkins nodded approvingly. "Of course." And so, I turned back to the boardroom, my future waiting on the other side of that conference table, while my past waited in the lobby. The rest of the presentation passed in a blur, though I held my voice steady and answered every question the board asked. I spoke clearly, even when my heart thudded so loudly I feared it might echo in the room. Eleanor chimed in with legal insights, and together we painted a vivid picture of Safe Space's impact and its future. When the board thanked us and promised a decision within 2 weeks, I nodded gratefully. But instead of hope, I felt an odd hollowness. My mind wasn't in the boardroom anymore. It was in the lobby where the family I hadn't seen or heard from in nearly a year now waited. "You were brilliant," Eleanor said gently as we packed up our things, especially considering what was going on outside that door. I nodded, gathering my laptop, my notes, and whatever strength I had left. And then I saw them. Gabriel stood just behind my mother and father. When my mum caught sight of me, she rose quickly, her face a mixture of emotions, hope, regret, and something that looked like resolve. My father stayed seated, arms folded, jaw tense. Gabriel hovered between them, not quite sure where to stand. Eleanor leaned over and whispered, "I'll give you some privacy. Call me later, okay?" I gave her a small nod before turning to face the people who had once called me family. "How did you even find me?" I asked, my voice low. My mum fidgeted with her bag. "There was an article about your housing work. We've been trying to contact you for months, but seeing the Watkins presentation mentioned in the piece, that's what brought us here today." My dad finally stood up. "This has gone on long enough, Jasmine. You're being childish." I let out a bitter laugh. "Childish? I came home to find my life in trash bags. You sold our house without a word and disappeared. And I'm the childish one?" My mum's voice shook. "We made a mistake. We want to make things right. Now," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "A year later, after I rebuilt my entire life. Why now?" Gabriel shifted uncomfortably. "Just hear them out, Jazz." "I know about the inheritance," I added quietly, watching their faces. There it was. A flicker of recognition passed over my father's eyes, while my mother's widened in surprise. "So that's why you're here?" I asked, more statement than question. "Because the money came through?" My father's expression darkened. "You've always been so quick to judge. And you've always been so quick to discard," I snapped. "You knew about my grandmother's estate last March. You kept it from me and then threw me away." My mother shook her head. We were ashamed. The foreclosure, the debt, your father lost his job, and I couldn't make enough cleaning houses. We didn't want to tell you. So you abandoned me instead of asking for help?" My voice stayed even, but every word hit like a hammer. "We found out about the inheritance right after you went back for spring semester," my dad added. "The lawyers told us it would be yours at 21. We thought if we moved, if we started fresh, we could stabilize everything before you found out." I crossed my arms. "So you sold the house, took my things, and left me with nothing." "We thought you'd be better off without our problems," my mother whispered. "You had your scholarship, your dorm, your professors. And now," I asked, "why the sudden change of heart?" They exchanged a glance. Then Gabriel spoke. "They made a mistake, Jazz. They know that now. And they saw what you've built. Safe space. They saw it in the press and realized they'd lost something valuable." "Your successful daughter?" I said with a sarcastic edge. "No," my mum said quickly. "Our family, our connection, our relationship." I studied them. These people who once told me that family was everything. My mum had more grey in her hair now. My father's shoulders looked smaller somehow, hunched beneath a worn jacket. Gabriel had grown taller, his once boyish face lined with early signs of adulthood. But I wasn't the same girl they had left behind either. "I've built a new life," I said quietly. One with people who support me, who didn't disappear. You'll always be our daughter, my father said. I met his gaze without blinking. And family doesn't throw your life in the trash. I stood and pulled a few bills from my wallet, placing them gently under the coffee cups. This should cover everything. As I turned to leave, I added, I don't need closure. I've moved on. But if you truly want to make things right, then respect my boundaries. I didn't wait for a response. I walked away. And for once, I didn't feel guilt or sadness, just a strange, quiet sense of power. The next morning, I got the email. The Watkins Foundation had awarded Safe Space the full grant amount, plus an additional $50,000 for operational expansion. That same afternoon, a national media outlet called. They wanted to feature the Safe Space initiative in a story about innovative housing justice programs. 2 weeks later, our story reached millions of viewers. I didn't hear from my parents again after that. I knew they saw the coverage, but sometimes the family you build, through trust, through shared purpose, through love, outshines the one you were born into. And as I looked ahead, I finally made a decision. I would no longer base my worth on anyone else's approval, not even theirs. The morning the article went live, I walked into our tiny Safe Space office with a coffee in one hand and a stack of intake forms in the other. The article had featured my photo, a quote about housing as a human right, and stories from students we'd helped. It wasn't just exposure, it was validation. The work we did mattered, and now the world could see it. By noon, we were flooded with emails from students, advocates, and even landlords who wanted to learn more about how to support fair housing practices. Our voicemail was full. Donations trickled in through the foundation's site, and one message from a former client simply read, "You saved my life. Thank you." I printed it out and pinned it beside the door, right under a quote Eleanor had taped up months ago. Start where you are. Use what you have. Do what you can. In the weeks that followed, the impact of the Watkins grant was immediate. We moved into a bigger space, a renovated floor in a community centre just 2 blocks from campus. We hired 2 more staff members, expanded our volunteer training, and launched weekend clinics for undocumented tenants and low-income families. And still, I never heard back from my parents. Not after the article, not after the move, not even when we hosted a small celebration to mark 1 year of the Safe Space initiative. I thought the silence would bring peace, but it lingered like a closed door with no lock, just the knowledge that someone could still knock. I didn't unblock their numbers. I didn't reply to the occasional emails from distant cousins asking, "Why won't you just talk to them?" I didn't owe anyone anything. Until one afternoon, a letter arrived. No return address, just my name, written in my mother's careful, slanted handwriting. I stared at it for a long time before opening it. Inside was a single page. "Jasmine, we're proud of you. We always were. We didn't know how to ask for help, and we made the worst mistake of our lives. Your father cries at night, even if you won't admit it. Gabriel talks about you all the time. I don't know if you'll ever forgive us, but we're still here. We're not asking for money. We're just asking that one day, if your heart lets you, maybe you'll call. Love always, Mum." I folded the letter neatly and placed it in my desk drawer, without a word. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I simply sat with it, letting the words settle like dust on old memories. That night I told Professor Wilkins about the letter. "Are you going to call?" she asked, her voice neutral. "I don't know," I admitted. "I think I'm still afraid. Not of them, but of reopening something that I've worked so hard to close." She gave me a thoughtful look. "You don't owe them your pain or your forgiveness, but you do owe yourself peace, whatever that looks like." Peace. It sounded simple, but it had taken me years to even glimpse it. So I chose not to call, not then, Instead, I threw myself into the next chapter of safe space. We partnered with a local shelter. We brought in social workers. We hosted our first town hall. We helped dozens of families fight back against unfair evictions. And slowly, the echoes of my past became quieter. Not gone, but quieter. The day I turned 21, I went for a walk by myself. No parties, no cake. Just me, the crisp air and a notebook I carried everywhere. I sat on a bench overlooking the river and wrote myself a letter. Not the kind you send, the kind you save. Dear Jasmine, you did it. Not because of them, not to prove anything, but because you believed that even broken beginnings can lead to beautiful stories. You chose to stay soft when it would have been easier to harden. You chose purpose over bitterness, and you chose to build. Keep going. I folded that letter and tucked it into the back of my journal. A few months later, I was invited to speak at a National Housing Justice Conference. The same girl who once found her life in trash bags was now standing in front of hundreds of legal professionals, advocates, and students, sharing how one act of abandonment became the spark that lit a movement. As I finished my speech, a standing ovation filled the room. I felt something shift inside me. Not pride, not vindication, but a deep, grounded sense of self. I knew who I was now. Not someone's daughter, not someone's castaway, but someone who had built something lasting. After the talk, a young woman approached me. My parents threw me out when I came out, she said quietly. Your story gave me hope. I hugged her. That's why we do this. And that's when it clicked. The people who show up for you in your darkest hours, those are the ones who become your real family. They may not share your blood, but they share your burdens. They lift you up. They remind you that you are not alone. I don't know if I'll ever reconnect with my parents. Some wounds heal with time, others become reminders. But either way, I've stopped waiting for them to be who I needed, because I became her for myself. And now, whenever I pass that old maple tree in Bakersfield, on the rare chance I visit, I don't feel the sting anymore. I just see the roots I once had, and the wings I grew afterward. Sometimes the deepest betrayals come not from strangers, but from the people we love most. This story reminds us that family is not defined by blood alone, but by those who show up, who choose us, and who stand beside us when it counts. Jasmine's journey is one of heartbreak, resilience, and quiet strength. When she was left behind, discarded, without explanation, she could have crumbled. Instead, she built a life of purpose and meaning from the very rubble meant to break her. Many of us, especially later in life, reflect on the relationships we've carried or let go, and in those reflections, we often learn that healing isn't always about reconciliation. It's about reclaiming our worth, setting boundaries, and surrounding ourselves with people who see our value. If you've ever had to walk away from someone who should have protected you, or found strength in starting over, you're not alone. Stories like Jasmine's remind us that even when others fail us, we can still choose to rise. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever had to rebuild from a painful family experience? Share your journey in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more powerful stories like this.